Hello YouTube, I'm here from Blue Needle Studios and today I'm here with episode 4 of my Photoshop for Beginners tutorial series, and I'm going to be talking all about layer styles. So basically, just to let you know, layer styles are basically all about the different effects that you can apply to layers. So for instance, you can add shadows, you can add outlines, you can add gradient overlays, which is basically when the top of an object fades to a different color at the bottom, or you can even get much more advanced to that. You can create glows, you can emboss things, you can do all sorts of really awesome stuff with layer styles, and they're something that you'll be really glad that you've learned and that you'll use heaps. So I'm just going to get straight into it. To view the layer styles window, really, what you need to do is double click on a layer like this, and then this panel will come up. So you can see that I've already got two different layer styles active. So here we've got our basic page. When we just open it up, you can change your opacity, your fill opacity, which I've talked a bit more about in an earlier episode, but basically it means that your shadows and things will stay there, but your object will not. And then there's the blend if, which is a little more complicated, and I won't go into that, but this is just the basic page. And then we can come into drop shadow. So I'm just going to work through the different layer styles. So we can find out which object this is. So this object is this country over here. So I've got a drop shadow applied. If I tick this, you can see how it comes on and off, and it creates a really nice shadow around the object that brings it out and defines it. So here we've got a few different things. We've got the blend mode, which basically changes the way that the effect interacts with other layers. It's a little complicated. Most of the time you just want this on normal. I didn't really have it on multiply for much of a reason. You can see though that nothing is changing. Then you can change the color of the shadow. So I usually keep it on black if the background is fairly light, or I have it on white if the background is black, for example. So I try to stick to black and white. Sometimes you can do some just light shades. So if I do like a light blue here, or actually since the country is green and the background is blue, if I do a light green here and I turn the opacity up, which is what I'm going to focus on next, you can see that this actually, in fact, I didn't realize that this would look so good. This actually looks pretty okay. But I'm just going to keep it on black and put this back down again. And so this is the opacity. It's really basic, just how transparent it is. So we can have it right up, or you can make it nice and soft. I tend to keep it soft, generally under 40%. And then we've got the angle of the shadow. So whichever direction this line is pointing towards, your shadow will be going down in the opposite. So if we have this pointing up, then our shadow is going downwards. If we have this pointing down, then our shadow is going upwards. And so we can just change this all around. I usually like it on this, so that we have a shadow going to the bottom right, and you can see this little preview here. Now I'm trying not to spend too much because I've got to get through all of these. Then we've got the distance, which separates the pretty obviously the distance between the object and the shadow. The spread basically just changes how hard it is and how big it is. The size kind of changes the size and kind of changes the softness as well. And then the noise can basically just add some noise, but most of the time you won't want to touch this. Okay, so that's the drop shadow. Now I'm going to come into the next one, which is inner shadow. So once we tick this, you can see that this has already happened, and of course it's the same thing as drop shadow except inner. I'm really smart. And so it's the opposite, and it gives a really cool effect as if you're seeing inside something, kind of like a 3D, as if an object is really being pulled out, and I think it's really awesome. So it's really similar to the drop shadow. We can turn this opacity down, and this gives us a pretty cool effect if something is supposed to be inside a box or something. The distance, everything is really exactly the same, but there's also the choke, which basically just takes some size off of the layer. Well, it takes some size off of the softness. So if you turn up the choke, then it's going to have really hard edges. If you turn it right down, the edges will be really nice and soft once it regenerates. And so the size is exactly the same. See, an effect like this I think looks really cool, especially with like some bold text. Not with thin text, because that won't turn out so well, but with really bold text this can look awesome. And then the noise is exactly the same. So I'm just going to turn this off so our layer doesn't end up being too clouded. I'm also going to turn off drop shadow because our next effect is similar to drop shadow, which is the outer glow. Now normally it will be in a yellow color, but I like to use this as a bit of a shadow even though it's a glow. So the difference between a drop shadow and an outer glow is that the drop shadow only goes in one direction, whereas the outer glow goes, of course, around the whole object. So what we can do if we want, the blend mode will automatically be screen, which basically cuts out any black. So you can see if we change this to black, we don't get much of an effect at all. So you want to change this to normal if you're going to be using it as a bit of a shadowy effect, and then you can see that it turns out similar to a drop shadow, and it does of course go all the way around, which can be really nice in some cases. So we've got the noise effect here now. You can also create a gradient of this shadow. This is a bit more advanced, so I'm not going to go into this. You can edit the color as well. The technique is softer or precise. Precise is a bit more, well, obviously it's more precise. It's more mathematically correct within the programming. Softer is just nice and easy to the eye. So most of the time you want to use softer, but once you get into heaps of advanced stuff with many layers and different techniques, I'm sure there'll be plenty of times you'll want to use precise. So here we've got the spread and size exactly like the other ones, and then what we've got is the range. So if we turn up the range, basically changes the range between the black and the transparent, so the fully shaded in and the fully disappeared. So if we have this right low, then it's just going to be really small. If we have this up a bit, then there's a bit of transition. If we have it right the way up, then it's whole transition. So this is another way to make it softer. And then jitter, if we turn this up, you know what, I don't really understand jitter. It's kind of similar to noise, but you don't really need to worry about it much. So we can turn this off. Out inner glow is exactly like drop shadow and inner shadow. All of these settings are the same, so I'm not even really going to touch on it. Then we've got bevel emboss and emboss, which can help bring your objects out. I hate to use this in most cases because I don't think that it looks very good at all, but I don't blame you if you have a totally different taste and you look at this right now and you think, wow, that's amazing, that deserves to be in a multi-million-dollar car ad. But anyway, so these are the different types of embossing. You can basically just look through them and see how it looks. I reckon that if I had to use one of the types of embossing, it would just be emboss, and then you can change the depth of the embossing, so how far in it's going. You can change the direction, up or down. You can change the size, which is kind of like the shadows, except it looks really weird if you have it up too high. You can soften it. I like to soften it a fair bit, although what it does is it ends up looking like your whole object is blurred. Then you can change the angle of the embossing. You can change the contour, which is a little more advanced, but it basically changes the shapes behind your embossing. So many techniques use this, but most of the time if you're just playing around you won't. Here of course are the blend modes. You've got your highlights and your shadows. So if you have these, I'm just trying to demonstrate what it is. The highlights are red, and I'm going to have the shadows as a dark blue. So here we can see here are the shadows and the highlights of the different depths of the emboss effect. So then if we take this off, we can also use satin, which just gives it a certain texture to the object. You don't really need to use this, and I don't use it personally. But you can if you want to. Maybe search some other videos specializing in satin, find out a bit more about that. Then you've got color overlay, which is a very simple effect. It basically is just an easy way to change the color of an object. So our blend mode is usually normal, our opacity is usually 100%. I believe that this color is usually black, or it's white or red or something like that. It doesn't really matter. And then you can just change this so the object will change color. So I'm just going to press cancel here because I want it to stay the same. You can also make these settings the default or reset them to the default. So you can do that with any of these. If you have a glow that you really like and you think you use all the time, then you can make it the default. So all you have to do is tick this and it'll be exactly like that. If you've been playing around with things too much, then you can press reset to default and it will be back to normal. And so here we've got the color overlay, and I'm going to turn this off because the basically the effects run just like layers. If you have a layer if you have a layer here on top of another layer, then it's going to be in front of it on your design. So here, if we have a color overlay and then a gradient overlay, the gradient doesn't do anything because the color is already activated and it's on top. So if we turn this off, then we can get our gradient overlay. So this is the default gradient overlay. so you can see the effect of a gradient right here. It's just fading between two colors, which can end up being really nice, and it's an amazing technique to use. It's probably I reckon that gradient overlay, drop shadow, and outer glow, but not as much, are the three layer styles that I use by far the most. So you should usually keep your blend mode on normal opacity 100%, or you can turn it down depending on what you want. Wow, this looks really nice actually. Okay, sorry about that. You can also reverse the direction of your gradient. You can change the angle here as well, just like a drop shadow. It just changes the angle of your, gradient. Then you can change the scale, which basically just changes the whole size of your gradient. So if you have it really small, then this it's the actual gradient part. It's not the size of the two colors, because this bit in here is the gradient. It's the two colors fading together. So you have it really small, then it's a small zone where they fade together. If we have it even smaller, then it's an even smaller zone when they fade together. If we have it, say, at 50%, then it's starting to get smooth. If we have it at 100%, hang on. Sorry. If we have it at 100%, then it's a really smooth gradient. We can also, for example, have it all the way up to really start to soften it. And so you've also got your style. You can have linear just for going in a certain direction. You can have radial for coming out in a circle. You can also use this in reverse like this. You can also have angle, which is kind of complicated, but it's a kind of nice effect. It's hard to find a way to make it look good, but if you can, then it looks really nice. You've also got reflected, which basically just has one color, it has your second color, your first color, and then your second color again. So that's the way that this works. And then we've also got a diamond, which is exactly how you would expect it to be. So for now, I'm going to actually go to radial, because I think that this can look quite good, and I am going to tick the reverse. And then I'm going to turn this scale down just a bit, and what I'm going to do is, well, the main part of your gradient is the actual gradient itself, so the colors. So if we come in here, we can see a few different presets. I like to use this neutral density, and what it does is it just creates a soft fade between your colors that you've got. So if we turn this down, then it can be really soft. If we turn it right up, then it can be quite harsh. So this is a really modern effect in my opinion, and it can be super great. But I'm going to go a bit more into the different types of gradients. So I'm going to click in here, and then here we've got some different presets. We can click this arrow here, and there are well, not millions, but there's probably a few hundred or 100 gradients, but sorry, there's lots of gradients. So if we come into color harmonies, it'll just ask us this. Just press OK, and then it will fade between two colors. I don't personally think that many of these color harmonies are really actually color harmonies, but anyway, you don't need to know my opinion. And then we've got some noise samples. This can give you a super cool effect. It's got lots of different things here. We can do all sorts of things with this. So for now, I'm just going to go back into color harmonies. And the best thing about these is that you can use them as a base for your own gradient. So here we've got the two colors already set up. We can click this one here, change the color, for example, to white. And then we can click this one here, change the color to a light, slightly darker blue. And then we can press OK, OK again, untick reverse, and here we've got a fairly nice gradient. So that's all I'm going to go into about gradients. The next is pattern, which just has many patterns. The default one looks pretty horrible. There's all sorts of patterns. Some of them can be pretty handy. I like the nature patterns. Some of the nature patterns are actually pretty decent. So we've got some flowers here. We've also got things like colored paper, which can be good if you're looking for a crafty sort of effect. We can bring this on here and turn the opacity down. You can do all sorts of things with pattern overlay, and all of these options are self-explanatory. And then the last thing that I'm going to be talking about is stroke. And stroke just creates an outline around your object. It's fairly basic, but it can look pretty good, and it can really help bring objects out. So here we've got the size of your stroke. It starts off at 1 pixel, and you can put it all the way up to 100, or the maximum is 250 on the slider. So maybe we'll just leave this at around 6 just for now. So we can change the position between outside, inside, and center, so changing the position in relation to the object. We can change the blend mode. If we had this on screen, then nothing comes up, because remember, screen takes away any black. So we can put this back on normal. The opacity, of course, is self-explanatory, just like with any of the other layer styles. The fill type you can have as a color, gradient, or pattern, and if you choose one of those, they work like all of these. And so if we want, we can just change the color, and we can, if we want, make this just a random purple. And so I'm just going to hide this. And yeah, that's basically my video describing how to use layer styles in Adobe Photoshop. I hope that you really enjoyed this video. I hope that you really learned some stuff. Make sure that you check out my Zazzle store. There's a link in the description where I sell t-shirts and mugs and posters and all sorts of things I've designed. Please subscribe. I'm doing heaps more videos for this series, and I really put a lot of work into my channel, so also any likes and comments are hugely appreciated. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.